welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking at something pretty interesting, the connections between economic crises, religion, and social enterprise.
Yeah.
You've given us some sources that go pretty deep on how faith and finance, which seem totally separate, actually kind of like bump up against each other.
It's a pretty unique way to look at things, for sure.
One of the sources actually says that economic crises are a form of violence, which I thought was kind of strange.
Yeah.
When I think about violence, I usually think like physical stuff.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, it's not the easiest connection to make, I guess. But the source goes into this whole idea of structural violence. They argue that systems, institutions can do harm without, actually physically hurting anyone.
Right.
Like, if people can't get a good education or afford health care, that's built-in harm from the system itself.
The source actually uses this powerful image, the violence iceberg,
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
to kind of illustrate this.
Right at the tip of the iceberg, that's where you see the obvious violence, the stuff we all know. But then if you go deeper, there's these layers of violence that are way less visible, but still super impactful.
Okay, so what's under the surface?
Well, right under that visible violence, there's this legitimized violence layer.
Yeah.
Stuff like military actions, police actions, things that are okay because, authority said so.
Okay.
And if we dig even deeper, that's when we get to that structural violence we were just talking about, right? All those inequalities that are so baked in that we kind of just accept them. Unequal access to resources, opportunities, even basic rights.
Right.
It's just how things are.
And then at the very bottom, the deepest, most hidden part.
That's where the source puts cultural violence. And this gets really subtle. It's all about ideas, beliefs, the way we use language. Think about the kind of talk that makes certain groups seem less human, or the stories we tell that make discrimination seem okay.
It's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah.
Those cultural forces could actually create a situation where violence is just, normal.
Totally. And cultural violence is sneaky because a lot of times we don't even realize it's happening. It shapes how we see the world and what we do. Think about how some stereotypes or prejudices are just everywhere in society.
Right.
Makes it easier to accept violence against certain groups.
So how does that violence iceberg connect to economic crises? Are they saying that economic troubles are always violent?
It's more about how economic crises make all those other forms of violence way worse.
Oh.
When things get scarce, when there's not enough to go around, those inequalities we talked about, they get even bigger. So the people who are already struggling, they get hit the hardest. More poverty, more discrimination, even physical danger.
I see. So it's like the economic crisis shines a light on where our system is already broken, like a magnifying glass.
Exactly. And that cultural violence we were talking about, that plays a big role too. When people are stressed about money, it's easier for them to get scared or angry. They start blaming other people, us versus them thinking, all that stuff.
So it's like a bad cycle.
Yeah.
Economic troubles lead to more violence, and then the violence makes the economy even worse.
Yeah, and that's where the sources say that religion can actually play a big part. And that might sound weird given all the violence that's been connected to religion in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
How can religion be part of the solution when it's caused so much conflict?
Yeah.
The source knows that's a paradox. It says that while religion can definitely divide people, it can also be a powerful force for peace, like a double-edged sword. It can hurt, but it can also heal.
So how does that work?
Well, the source points out that, at their core, most religions care about morality, ethics, the well-being of all people. They give us ways to understand suffering, encourage compassion, and seek justice.
So they're like a moral compass to help us deal with all this difficult stuff.
Exactly. And the source says that religions can give us tools for conflict resolution, making suffering less bad, figuring out how to cooperate, and imagining better futures. That's a lot of good stuff.
It is. And now I'm seeing how this all goes back to that violence iceberg. If we actually want to fix the root causes of economic crises and all the violence that comes with them, we have to look beyond just money,
Yeah.
Economic policy isn't enough.
Right.
We have to deal with those deeper cultural and moral issues. And maybe that's where religion can help.
Exactly. The source really emphasizes this idea of deep peace. It says that true peace, lasting peace, that takes more than just not having war or having fair economic policies.
Right.
It takes a real change in our values, our beliefs, our culture. And religion, with its focus on ethics and compassion, can be a super important part of that change.
Okay, let's talk about deep peace then. The source introduces this as the opposite of that violence iceberg. They even call it a peace-building garden.
Oh, yeah, nice image. So, while the violence iceberg shows all the destructive stuff going on, the peace-building garden shows what's possible, all the potential for growth, healing, real change.
Right.
And the source lays out 3 levels of peace. Each one builds on the one before it.
Okay, so what are the 3 levels?
The first level is basic peace. It's basically just not being in immediate danger, like having rule of law.
Okay.
Think about a government that works, a police force you can trust, a justice system that protects everyone's rights.
So that's like the bare minimum for a stable, safe society.
Yeah, exactly. And without basic peace, you can't even start dealing with the other levels of violence.
Okay. What about the next level?
That's policy peace. Here's where we try to fix those inequalities that lead to violence. It's all about making sure everyone has fair access to stuff like healthcare, education, housing, and being able to participate in the economy.
Right.
So like creating a level playing field, everyone gets a fair shot.
And lastly, we get to deep peace. What does that look like?
Yeah. Deep peace is where we cultivate those cultural and spiritual roots that help us trust each other, understand each other, be compassionate. It's about tackling the beliefs and values that can either fuel conflict or help us get along. The source says there are 5 key things, 5 seeds that need to be planted to grow deep peace.
5 seeds. Tell me more.
The first seed is literacy, but they don't just mean reading and writing. They mean it in a bigger way,
Right.
like being able to understand the world, to look at information critically, and to develop empathy for different points of view.
So it's about becoming more intellectually and emotionally intelligent, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's nonviolent practices. It's about making peace a habit. Internally and also in how we interact with others, choosing to talk things out instead of getting aggressive, looking for peaceful solutions to problems,
Right.
creating a culture of respect and understanding.
Okay. The next seed is engaged empathy. And that seems to build on literacy, right? Like understanding other people's perspectives.
Definitely. But it goes even further.
Okay.
Engaged empathy isn't just about feeling sorry for someone. It's about really getting what they're going through, feeling their pain, and then actually doing something to help.
So it's about moving from sympathy to action. What about the last 2 seeds?
The fourth one is principled pluralism.
Okay.
This is about being okay with diversity while still working toward common goals.
Right.
Recognizing that different perspectives are valuable and finding ways to overcome divisions.
Right.
Even when people have totally different beliefs.
And the final seed.
That one's organizing for social enterprise. It's
Yeah.
about putting all these principles into action, creating institutions and initiatives that are sustainable, using our energy and resources to build a more just and fair world.
So deep peace isn't just some dream. It's something we can actually work toward by growing these 5 seeds. This all sounds very hopeful. But how do we actually put it into practice, especially when we're dealing with economic problems? That's where social enterprise comes in, right?
Absolutely. The source suggests that what they call spiritually grounded social enterprise could be part of the solution. It's about using the values and resources from both the business world and the religious sphere to make real, lasting change.
When I hear social enterprise, I usually think about charities or nonprofits. But the source seems to be talking about something a little different.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about giving money away. Social enterprise challenges that old separation between making money and doing good. It's about using business ideas, innovation, and market forces to actually fix the deep social problems that are at the heart of so many economic crises.
So it's kind of like a hybrid model. It blends the efficiency of the business world with the ethical values that are often found in religious traditions.
That's it. The source describes social enterprise as a disciplined, innovative, and risk-tolerant entrepreneurial process. It's about seeing opportunities where other people just see problems and then figuring out how to use resources to actually create social good and change the system itself.
I see. So you're not rejecting the whole idea of the market. You're using it to do good, finding solutions that are both good for people and make financial sense.
Yeah, that's the key. It's about thinking long term, investing in solutions that can change the root causes of problems and create lasting positive change.
This is really fascinating stuff. It's like idealism meets pragmatism, vision meets action.
Totally.
And to show how this works in the real world, the source talks about two case studies,
Mhm.
Habitat for Humanity and the Hizmet Movement.
Yeah.
Those seem like totally different organizations, at least
Mhm.
on the surface. I'm curious to learn more about how they both embody these spiritually grounded social enterprise principles.
Me too. Let's start with Habitat for Humanity. Most people think about them building houses, but they do a lot more than that. It's really interesting how they use faith to create change.
Yeah, I know a bit about what they do, but I'd love to understand more about their, philosophy. How do they actually work as a spiritually grounded social enterprise?
Well, the source highlights their mission statement, which is to put God's love into action, bringing people together to build homes, but also communities and hope.
Right.
Their work is really rooted in Christian principles, but they work with people of all faiths and backgrounds.
So they're not just building houses, they're trying to create those deeper connections and support systems that help a community thrive.
Yeah, exactly. And they have these 5 guiding principles that inform their work: love, shelter, advocacy, dignity, and sustainable development.
Okay.
These principles show that they're taking a holistic approach. They want to help families in the short term, but also fix the systems that keep people in poverty.
It makes sense. You can't just build someone a house and expect all their problems to disappear.
Right.
You have to address those underlying social and economic issues that contribute to their situation.
And that's where their focus on advocacy comes in. They don't just build houses, they also try to change the policies that make housing so unequal.
So can you give me an example of that advocacy work?
Sure. One thing they do is push for affordable housing policies at the local, state, and even national level.
Hmm.
They work to educate lawmakers and the public about why affordable housing is so important. And they support policies that help low-income families buy homes.
So they're attacking the problem on multiple fronts. They're helping families directly, but also trying to create bigger systemic change.
Exactly. They see those two things as connected, like they need to do both.
Now, the source also mentions Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat. He has a pretty amazing story, right?
Yeah, Millard Fuller was a very successful businessman. By the time he was 29, he was already a millionaire. But he wasn't really happy with just having a lot of money and stuff.
Right.
He wanted to do something more meaningful, so he sold everything he owned and, with his wife, started Habitat for Humanity.
Wow.
He's a great example of someone who used his business skills for a higher purpose.
Yeah, that's a big change from the whole greed is good mindset we often see in business.
Totally. And his story connects with Habitat's core belief in what they call a theology of enough.
Theology of enough, what does that mean?
It's the idea that there are enough resources in the world for everyone to have what they need,
Right.
but there's not enough for everyone to be greedy. It really challenges that consumerist mindset,
Yeah.
the one that leads to so much inequality and environmental problems.
I like that. It's such a simple but powerful idea. It makes you ask, how much is actually enough?
Exactly. And Habitat puts this idea into action with their no-interest mortgage program. They give affordable home loans to families who wouldn't qualify for a regular mortgage. Helps them get out of debt and become more financially stable in the long run.
That's huge. I mean, those predatory lending practices have trapped so many families in poverty. Habitat is fighting against that directly.
Absolutely. And it fits perfectly with that theology of enough. It's like they're saying, you don't have to exploit people to be successful. You can have a business that makes money and does good at the same time.
It seems like Habitat really embodies those deep peace seeds we talked about. Can you connect those dots for me?
Sure. Let's start with literacy. Habitat doesn't just give families a house and say, here you go. They make sure homeowners take classes on managing their money, and they have to put in sweat equity hours.
Right.
So they help build their own homes and their neighbors' homes, too. That gives them not just a place to live, but the skills and knowledge to manage their money and be part of the community.
So they're helping them feel like they have ownership, like they have control,
Yeah.
which is so important for people to get out of poverty.
Exactly. And when it comes to nonviolent practices, Habitat is all about working together and respecting each other. They bring people together from all different backgrounds to work side by side. It breaks down barriers and helps people feel like they're part of something bigger.
I love that image. People from different religions, races, and incomes all working together to build homes.
It's pretty powerful, and it shows how much we can achieve when we focus on a shared goal. Now, think about engaged empathy. Habitat really tries to understand what the families they serve need and want.
Yeah.
They don't just come in and say, this is how it's going to be. They work with families to design homes that fit their needs and give them more control over their lives.
It's about respecting their dignity and agency, understanding that they know what's best for themselves.
Right. And that connects with principled pluralism, too. Habitat partners with all kinds of organizations,
Yeah.
churches, synagogues, businesses, community groups. They know that to solve big problems like poverty, you need everyone working together.
So they're really putting that principle into practice, building these coalitions and finding common ground to make positive change.
Exactly. And their commitment to organizing for social enterprise is clear in how they run their organization. They have a huge network of volunteers and donors, and they've built a solid financial structure that lets them keep going.
Right.
They've created a model that really works, and that can be replicated and expanded.
It's amazing how they've combined their faith-based values with this really practical, results-oriented approach.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about the Hizmet movement. It's a global movement inspired by Fethullah Gulen, a Turkish Muslim scholar.
I don't know as much about them. What are their main beliefs? How do they approach the idea of spiritually grounded social enterprise?
Hizmet means service in Turkish. They really emphasize education, interfaith dialogue, and serving others without expecting anything in return. Their motto is, living so that others may live.
That's a really beautiful motto. It really emphasizes the importance of connection,
Yeah.
taking care of each other.
Right. And Gulen teaches that you need to transform yourself on the inside before you can change the world. He believes that if we focus on becoming more compassionate, tolerant, and knowledgeable, then we can create a more just and peaceful world.
So it starts with personal growth, but it doesn't stop there.
Exactly. It's not just about being a good person in your own little bubble. It's about using those qualities to actually make the world a better place. And the Hizmet movement puts this into practice through a network of schools, cultural centers, and humanitarian aid organizations all over the world.
The source says they're active in over 150 countries.
That's right. They've started schools that offer a high-quality secular education. They focus on critical thinking, science, and ethics. They've also created hospitals, orphanages, and disaster relief organizations that help people of all faiths and backgrounds.
That's incredible. It sounds like their work is very connected to those deep peace seeds we were talking about. Can you say more about that?
Of course. When it comes to literacy, the Hizmet movement is all about education as a way to empower people and make social change happen.
Right.
They believe that if you give people knowledge, critical thinking skills, and a strong moral compass, they can become more informed and active citizens.
So it's not just about learning facts. It's about developing the ability to understand things, make good judgments, and act ethically.
Exactly. And that connects to their focus on nonviolent practices, too. The Hizmet movement believes in dialogue and peaceful solutions to conflict, even when they are being persecuted. They promote tolerance and respect for diversity, and they try to build understanding between different religions and cultures.
And how does engaged empathy show up in their work?
They have a long history of doing humanitarian aid and disaster relief work. They've responded to crises all over the world, providing food, shelter, medical care, and emotional support to people in need.
Wow.
And they do it for everyone, no matter who they are or what they believe. That really shows their empathy and compassion.
It sounds like they're really walking the walks, not just talking the talk.
Yeah, they're definitely putting their values into action. And in terms of principled pluralism, they're big advocates for interfaith dialogue and understanding. They organize conferences, workshops, and cultural exchanges that bring people from different faiths together.
Okay.
So they can learn from each other and build relationships based on respect.
So they're actively trying to get rid of the suspicion and misunderstanding that often lead to conflict.
Exactly. And their approach to organizing for social enterprise can be seen in the institutions they've built. They've created schools, hospitals, and businesses that not only serve their communities, but also make money that can support their ongoing work. It's a model that balances social responsibility with being financially stable.
It's really interesting how both Habitat for Humanity and the Hizmet movement, even though they come from different religious backgrounds, they both landed on this spiritually grounded social enterprise thing.
Yeah.
Like, they both realize that combining compassion with actually doing something, taking action, is really powerful.
Right. I think it speaks to this universal desire people have to make the world better, to use whatever they have, their resources, their skills to help people who are suffering and build a fairer society.
Hmm.
And the source is saying that a lot of times that urge is connected to our spiritual beliefs and values.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, for a lot of people, their faith is what drives them to help others,
Right.
to try and make a difference. But the source also seems to be saying that just having good intentions isn't enough, right?
Exactly.
It keeps emphasizing the need for that, what was it? Disciplined, innovative, and risk-tolerant entrepreneurial process.
It's not enough to just want to do good. You got to have a plan, you got to be willing to try new things, to adapt, and you got to know how to manage money and resources to create solutions that last.
So it's about having both your heart and your head in the game.
Exactly. You need the passion, but you also need to be practical. And if you look at Habitat and the Hizmet Movement, they both seem to have figured out that balance.
Right.
They've created organizations that are grounded in their values, but they also really know how to get things done.
Now, the source mentions a couple of specific Hizmet Movement initiatives that I thought were really interesting, Kimse Mu and Bangkasha.
Yeah.
Can we talk about those a little more?
Sure. Kimse Mu, which means, is anybody there?
Yeah.
In Turkish, was a humanitarian aid and disaster relief organization.
Right.
They worked in Turkey and internationally, responding to all kinds of crises like earthquakes, floods, wars, famines.
I remember reading about their sister family project.
Oh, yeah.
That seemed like a really cool way to build community.
It was. They paired families from different social classes, giving them chances to share meals, celebrate holidays together, and just support each other through the ups and downs of life. It's a great example of how to break down social barriers and build real connections, even when people are different.
It's such a simple but powerful idea.
Yeah.
Just sharing a meal or celebrating a holiday together.
Yeah.
It can help people get over their prejudices and fears.
Exactly. And the impact of those relationships went way beyond just the families themselves.
Oh, really?
It spread through the community, creating a culture of empathy and solidarity.
But the source says that Kimse Mu was shut down by the Turkish government in 2016.
Yeah.
What happened there?
It's complicated and kind of controversial.
Yeah.
The Turkish government accused the Hizmet movement of being behind a coup attempt in 2016. And they started cracking down on the movement. Lots of their institutions, including Kimse Mu, were shut down, and a lot of people connected to the movement were arrested.
That's so sad. So their commitment to service and compassion was actually seen as a threat.
It's a really sad example of how sometimes those in power feel threatened by movements that challenge the way things are, even when those movements are peaceful and want to help people.
So what happened to Kimse Mu after it was shut down?
Well, a lot of the people who were part of it kept doing humanitarian work through other organizations.
Oh, that's good.
Like Embrace Relief, which is now based in the U.S. They're still helping people in need around the world, continuing what Kimse Mu started.
That's good to hear. It shows how resilient people can be, how strong those values of compassion and service are. Okay, let's talk about Bangkasha. This was a participation bank based on Islamic principles. I'm not really familiar with Islamic banking.
Sure.
Can you explain how that works? What makes it different?
So Islamic banking follows Islamic law, which doesn't allow charging or paying interest. Okay. So instead of making money from interest, participation banks use a profit-sharing model. They invest in things like real estate and businesses, and then they share the profits and losses with the people who deposit money in the bank.
So it's supposed to be a more ethical and fair system, right?
Yeah.
Where the risks and rewards are shared more evenly.
Exactly. It's about making financial practices match up with ethical principles,
Right.
Trying to create more social justice and economic well-being.
I'm curious, how does that model deal with the usual concerns about risk and return that are so important in regular banking?
That's a good question. Islamic banking has developed pretty sophisticated ways of managing risk and choosing investments. They focus on things that have real value and help society, like building infrastructure, sustainable agriculture, and businesses that are ethical.
So it's not just about avoiding interest. It's about a whole different approach to finance, one that's based on values and benefits, both individuals and society.
Exactly. And Bangkasha, being one of the main participation banks in Turkey, played a big role in promoting that model of Islamic finance.
But the source says that Bangkasha also had problems.
Yeah.
It was seized by the Turkish government in 2016 as part of that crackdown on the Hizmet movement we talked about.
Unfortunately, yes. The government accused Bangkasha of funding terrorism and other illegal things. The bank and the Hizmet movement denied it, of course.
Right.
But a lot of people saw it as a political move, part of a larger effort to silence critics and keep control.
It's a reminder that even when you're trying to do good, you can get caught in the middle of power struggles.
Absolutely. The stories of Kim Seok-moo and Bank Aja show just how tricky it can be to navigate those spaces where social, economic, and political forces all come together.
Building a better world isn't easy.
No.
There are always going to be roadblocks and setbacks. But as we've seen in these case studies, there are also really inspiring examples of people and organizations who are dedicated to making a difference.
Yeah.
People who are willing to take risks and keep going, even when things get tough.
That's a big takeaway from our deep dive today. It's not about finding easy answers or expecting overnight miracles. It's about having that long-term vision,
Right.
that commitment to deep peace, and being willing to plant those seeds, knowing that it might take a while for them to really grow.
I'm thinking about how connected everything we've talked about is.
Yeah.
It's like a tapestry woven together with threads of economics, religion, social justice, and human hope.
And the source says that to really deal with the problems we face, we need to stop thinking in such separate, isolated ways. We have to see how interconnected our inner lives are with the systems around us, how our values connect with our economic systems.
It's about realizing that we can't just fix things in one little area and expect it to solve everything.
Right.
We need to work on ourselves, on our communities, and also try to change the systems that cause inequality and injustice.
It has to be both.
Mm.
Inner change and outer action working together.
And the source is saying that deep peace isn't just some impossible dream.
Yeah.
It's actually what we need to create a future that's sustainable and just. Like, what if cultivating compassion, empathy, and cooperation isn't just a nice thing to do, but actually the key to our survival?
It's a big question. It makes us rethink our priorities and what we can do to create the world we want to live in.
So as we wrap things up today, we want to leave you with one final thought. The sources we've explored show us a different way of being in the world, a way that blends wisdom from both spiritual and practical perspectives.
Yeah.
It's a path that takes courage, creativity, and a dedication to serving others.
And it all starts with each of us. What seeds are you ready to plant in your life, in your community? What role will you play in cultivating that deep peace that the world needs so badly?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's inspired you to keep asking these questions and to take action in whatever way you can. Until next time, keep diving deep.